It was supposed to be a routine address, until the Speaker of the House whispered 6 words that would shatter Buckingham Palace's silence. "We demand access to her accounts." What followed left Queen Camilla frozen in her seat, as cameras rolled and gasps echoed across the royal benches. The chamber had been restless all morning. Whispers of dissatisfaction with the crown's spending had circled Westminster for months, but no one expected this moment to come so soon, let alone with such precision. As Queen Camilla sat poised beside King Charles during the annual review of royal finances, she had no idea the very institution that once embraced her was preparing to tear her legacy apart. The speaker stood with unusual weight in his voice. The words fell like hammers. A motion was being introduced to demand a full investigation, not into the monarchy's budget or ceremonial expenses, but directly into Queen Camilla's private and offshore financial holdings. Silence collapsed into stunned murmurs. Senior lords stood in support, their faces grave, their signatures already inked. This wasn't a symbolic gesture. This was a coordinated strike. What made the moment even more electrifying was the sudden appearance of a figure known only to a few within the palace's inner circle, a royal whistleblower whose identity remained shielded, but whose knowledge appeared deeply intimate. The individual had apparently been working with Parliament for months, collecting information, gathering documents, and preparing to expose what they claimed was a system of financial insulation that protected Camilla from both scrutiny and accountability. Camilla's eyes scanned the room, darting from one lord to another, trying to gauge who had turned. Her composure began to crack. She turned to King Charles, searching his expression for reassurance. But the king's face remained fixed, as if carved from marble. He neither defended her nor intervened. His stillness was deafening. At that moment, the queen realized she was utterly alone. Across the country, televisions buzzed with the breaking news. Parliament launches probe into Queen Camilla's hidden finances. Twitter exploded. Hashtags emerged. The queen consort, once viewed as untouchable, was now being publicly investigated by the very powers that once swore allegiance to the crown. The world watched as the carefully built image of grace and loyalty gave way to suspicion and disbelief. And in those final moments before she slipped quietly out of the session, Camilla's eyes welled with visible tears, not from guilt, perhaps, but from humiliation. The walls of Parliament had echoed with many scandals over the centuries, but few had ever targeted the monarchy with such pointed force. The royal court had been shaken before, but this was different. This was personal. And worse, it was just the beginning. But the real firestorm wasn't inside Parliament. It was the secrets hiding just beneath Camilla's glittering crown. Hidden beneath centuries-old stonework and royal portraits lies a private vault, known to only a few. Its existence has long been denied, but investigators now claim it holds the very proof Parliament seeks. As the shockwaves from the Parliamentary probe rippled through the monarchy, murmurs of a hidden chamber under Clarence House began to surface, whispers once dismissed as conspiracy suddenly took on a chilling credibility. According to a former royal staffer who testified under strict anonymity, there exists a private vault far from the reach of official royal accountants. The testimony was brief but explosive. This wasn't just a locked room filled with dusty records. Inside, the staffer claimed, were envelopes of untraceable cash, antique jewels with disputed origins, and most damning of all bearer bonds issued through obscure offshore institutions. There were no names on the documents, only initials, signatures, and coded references. But one set of initials appeared consistently: CR, the very initials Camilla adopted upon her marriage into royalty. The allegations struck at the core of royal financial decorum. If true, they suggested a shadow system, one that operated outside the oversight of the royal treasury, with Camilla managing a financial empire far larger than anyone suspected. For years, this side of her affairs had been carefully walled off behind charm, tradition, and royal privilege. But now, cracks in that wall were widening. And then came the discovery that changed everything. In a secluded Italian villa, long associated with Camilla's extended family, local authorities uncovered a velvet-lined box tucked inside a locked drawer. Inside was a safe deposit key, registered to a vault number that traced back to a London institution with ties to Clarence House. While palace officials scrambled to discredit the find as circumstantial, investigators weren't convinced. The key was real. and it opened a door to secrets the monarchy had never intended to confront. Even MI5 began to take quiet notice. Not because of the money, but because of what and who it might implicate. If these accounts were used to move funds across borders without scrutiny, the implications extended beyond corruption. It hinted at vulnerability, risk, foreign leverage. The Crown, suddenly, wasn't just under moral pressure, it was under strategic threat. The British public, already captivated by the drama unfolding in Parliament, erupted online. Hashtags like Clarence Cash and Camilla Vault surged through social media. Demands for full financial disclosure hit the airwaves, and political leaders who once avoided confrontation with the Crown now found themselves emboldened. Transparency became the rallying cry of a nation torn between reverence and rage. Yet while the vault raised eyebrows, the names tied to her finances would blow open the monarchy's fragile alliance. Russian oligarchs, Middle Eastern royals, a tech billionaire under tax investigation. The names discovered in Camilla's financial records weren't just shocking, they were dangerous. As scrutiny intensified around the mysterious vault beneath Clarence House, investigators widened their search, and what they uncovered stretched far beyond British soil. Leaked files from a whistleblower inside a Guernsey-based trust firm revealed a complex web of transactions tied to a discreet holding company. This firm, buried beneath layers of legal anonymity, had quietly funneled millions into causes linked directly to Queen Camilla over the last 15 years. On the surface, these were framed as philanthropic donations, but the deeper the paper trail went, the clearer the pattern became. These weren't charitable gifts, they were strategic placements. Each financial transfer was neatly timed. A generous donation from a Russian banking mogul would precede a knighthood announcement by mere weeks. A large endowment from a Gulf state prince aligned suspiciously with a trade agreement fast-tracked through private channels. And then there was the tech billionaire whose quiet $6.8 million foundation grant came just before Camilla reportedly lobbied for royal endorsement of a startup-friendly policy in the House of Lords. None of these connections were illegal on paper, but none of them were declared either. They existed in a twilight space, untaxed, unspoken, untraceable until now. But perhaps most damning was a leaked internal memo from within a royal advisory council, one that should never have seen daylight. It made clear reference to C's continued direction over informal contract placements, suggesting that Camilla had wielded her influence to steer royal service contracts toward entities closely aligned with her foreign benefactors. The language was cautious, coded but unmistakable. This wasn't just financial entanglement. This was a betrayal of the Crown's impartiality. Inside Buckingham Palace, the fallout was immediate and fierce. Prince William, known for his measured tone, was reportedly incandescent. Sources close to Kensington Palace revealed that he viewed the revelations as a stain on the monarchy's credibility. Princess Anne, equally incensed, allegedly confronted her brother Charles in private, demanding that action be taken to distance the Crown from Camilla's foreign entanglements. Yet Charles remained silent in public. Whether from loyalty, fear, or denial, he stood by his queen even as the institution they served began to fracture under the pressure. The tension reached a breaking point when Camilla's most trusted aide, an advisor who had served her loyally for over 2 decades, suddenly resigned. Without warning, she disappeared from public view, boarding a private jet bound for Switzerland. Her departure sent a chilling message. Something was coming, and she didn't want to be around when it hit. But Camilla's connections weren't just political, they were personal. And one old friend was about to turn into an enemy. When her ex-husband walked into the private inquiry chamber, no one expected what he'd say, not even Camilla. And what he revealed would crush decades of carefully guarded royal facades. Andrew Parker Bowles had long remained silent, an ever-dignified figure in the background of royal history. But when summoned to testify before the Parliamentary Committee, his decision to appear sent a jolt through the monarchy's inner circles. Dressed in quiet defiance, he did not arrive to protect the woman he once loved. He came with a story, and it was far from flattering. In a room heavy with tension, he confirmed what had long been suspected behind closed doors: that in the earliest years of Camilla's relationship with Charles, long before her public acceptance into the royal fold, she had already begun building her own fortress financially and politically. He revealed that at her request, he he had helped establish overseas trusts registered in his own name, with the sole purpose of shielding assets that Camilla feared might be scrutinized or seized by royal advisors. According to him, she had confided that Charles's inner circle never truly trusted her, and she feared that one wrong move could lead to her being cut off financially, emotionally, and permanently. In those moments of doubt and insecurity, she turned not to the palace, but to her ex-husband, a man who, out of habit or perhaps a lingering sense of obligation, agreed to protect her secrets. But that wasn't all. Andrew went further, suggesting that Camilla had been in quiet contact with several powerful political lobbyists, men who had coached her on how to build influence, secure leverage, and carve out her own seat of power within a system that wasn't built to accommodate her. It was a side of Camilla the public had never seen. One not born of royal blood, but forged in strategy and survival. The chamber sat in stunned silence as his words echoed. Not out of hatred, Andrew clarified, but from a need to unburden a truth that had weighed on him for years. He was calm, composed, even sympathetic, but the damage was irreversible. Back at the palace, the fallout was immediate and raw. Sources claimed Camilla collapsed into tears upon hearing the full transcript. For a woman who had climbed a treacherous ladder of public scorn, royal rivalry, and decades of private doubt, this felt like the ultimate betrayal from the only person who once understood her before the crown ever touched her head. And yet, from Charles, there came no statement, no hand of reassurance, no public defense, only silence. But the most damning blow wasn't from Parliament or her past, it came from the Queen herself. Sealed in a crimson envelope, the Queen's private letter to Princess Anne was never meant for public eyes. But in the wake of scandal, Anne read it aloud, and its final words shattered Camilla's last line of defense. In the days following Andrew Parker Bowles' revelation, the royal family retreated behind closed doors. Camilla, bruised by betrayal and bound by silence, clung to the few remaining layers of respectability. But nothing could prepare her or the world for what Princess Anne was about to do. In a rare and somber appearance before the Privy Council, Anne stepped forward, holding a delicate envelope that bore her mother's personal seal. It had been written months before Queen Elizabeth's passing. A letter of private reflection, legacy, and concern. And with unwavering composure, Anne made the decision to read it aloud. The words carried a weight far beyond politics. The Queen, revered as the unshakable foundation of the monarchy, had put to paper a truth she never dared speak in public. She wrote of Camilla's unmonitored financial systems, calling them deeply troubling. In the Queen's own hand, she confessed that while Camilla had publicly embraced royal duties, she had also quietly built walls that blocked the crown's oversight. Elizabeth admitted she had been uneasy about Camilla's growing influence, particularly her financial independence, which threatened to destabilize centuries of constitutional balance. She wrote not with cruelty, but with clarity, and perhaps guilt for allowing it to continue. The letter went further, confirming what many in the public had long suspected but never heard officially acknowledged. The Queen had never approved of Camilla's full elevation. She had relented, Anne explained, only out of loyalty to Charles, and under immense pressure to maintain stability after years of emotional upheaval following Diana's death. That single admission ignited a storm of reactions. For a woman who had worn the crown for over 70 years, the idea that she had doubted her son's wife and regretted the compromises was earth-shattering. The room fell into stunned silence. Anne's decision to reveal the letter wasn't made out of malice, it was duty. The monarchy, she insisted, had to reclaim its integrity. And to do that, the public needed the truth, even if it was uncomfortable. Camilla, seated only steps away, could not hold back. The tears fell freely as she rose and quietly exited. She didn't look at Charles. She didn't say a word. Because what more could be said when the voice of the late Queen had already spoken the final verdict? In an instant, the conversation shifted. The scandal was no longer just about hidden accounts or suspicious donors. It was about legacy, about betrayal of trust at the very top. The letter reignited old wounds, memories of Diana, debates over the line of succession, and questions about who truly belonged in the future of the monarchy. Public opinion, once divided, began to turn. Support for Camilla, already fraying, unraveled at lightning speed. And amid the uproar, Parliament sensed an opportunity too powerful to ignore. With the Queen's posthumous doubts now public, Parliament pressed deeper this time into Camilla's personal inheritance trail. Tucked away in the French countryside, a lavish chateau sits quietly in Camilla's name. But when investigators arrive, they uncover more than wine cellars and silk wallpaper. They find documents that could bring down a queen. As the palace scrambled to control the narrative at home, foreign authorities began to close in on a different front. The trail of financial irregularities unearthed in London didn't stop at the borders of the United Kingdom. It led investigators straight to the sun-drenched hills of Provence, where a centuries-old estate hidden behind layers of corporate shell games was quietly traced back to a foundation linked to Camilla's former step-cousin. The property, surrounded by vineyards and long guarded from public view, had escaped scrutiny for years. But its connection to the Guernsey accounts was too precise to ignore. Inside, investigators discovered more than antique furniture and royal portraits. They found items once catalogued in Buckingham Palace's private collection of gilded clocks, tapestries, and heirloom jewelry that had allegedly gone missing during the last major inventory. How these artifacts ended up in a foreign estate was a mystery, but their presence raised a damning question. Had Camilla been siphoning royal property into private hands? And if so, for how long? The deeper they searched, the darker it got. In the chateau's lower level, what appeared to be a converted wine cellar had in fact become a secure archive. Rows of fireproof cabinets held meticulously kept ledger records of wire transfers from shell accounts tied to undisclosed Middle Eastern firms. The transactions were frequent, quiet, and significant in size. And while the names were redacted or absent, the patterns suggested these were not mere gifts, they were ongoing payments. Even French authorities, initially reluctant to interfere with British royal matters, could not ignore the growing web of financial intrigue unraveling in their jurisdiction. Their Customs and Financial Crime Unit joined the probe, launching a parallel investigation into potential cross-border tax evasion and diplomatic fraud. The estate's ownership structure, shielded by European trust laws, came under immediate pressure. And with Camilla listed as a passive beneficiary in several linked documents, even her diplomatic passport status was brought into question. News of the Chateau scandal broke in Europe before it hit the UK press. But once it did, it spread like wildfire. The image of Camilla, already weathered by scandal at home, was now stained by allegations of deceit abroad. Media outlets began framing the Queen not as a royal consort, but as the center of an international financial conspiracy. Public opinion, once divided, was collapsing. Even the palace's most loyal defenders struggled to explain away the sheer scale of the findings. But even amid legal chaos abroad, nothing hit harder than the backlash brewing inside her own family. He waited until the press had gone home and the palace doors were shut. Then, in a private confrontation that stunned insiders, Prince William gave Camilla a choice: step back or be pushed out. For weeks, William had kept his counsel. He watched from the sidelines as headlines mounted, scandals unfolded, and the monarchy's reputation eroded before the world's eyes. But after the French revelations, and following Anne's reading of the Queen's private letter, he could remain silent no longer. The damage was now seeping into the next generation, into his children's lives, their futures, their identity. And so, with quiet fury and a sense of responsibility not even his father seemed willing to shoulder, he called for a closed-door meeting inside the palace. Only 4 people were allowed in: William, Charles, Camilla, and Catherine. What followed was not a shouting match. It was something far colder, far more dangerous. William laid out the facts. Parliament's investigation had reached a boiling point. International authorities were circling, and the monarchy's survival depended on swift, decisive action. He demanded full public disclosure of all financial records tied to Camilla, domestic and foreign. No redactions, no palace spin. And if she refused, he made it clear she would be stripped of all public-facing royal duties. No appearances, no charities, no throne beside the king. Camilla, visibly shaken, turned to Charles for protection. But the king, already drowning in the political consequences, didn't leap to her defense. Instead, he hesitated. The man who had once defied a nation to love her now stood speechless as the son he had raised became the voice of judgment. Torn between loyalty to the woman who had endured with him for decades and the future of the crown itself, Charles reportedly stormed out of the room, unable or unwilling to choose. Catherine, ever composed but resolute, spoke next. She didn't attack Camilla, but rather laid bare the toll the scandal had taken on the royal children. The constant press glare, the whispers in the halls, the shame by association. "We're raising heirs in the shadow of your choices," she reportedly said. Her words were not cruel, but they cut with precision. Anne, though not physically present, had already voiced her position privately. She stood with William. And across the Atlantic, a cryptic message from Harry arrived through a mutual advisor. "For once, I agree with my brother." Surrounded by portraits of the sovereign's past, Camilla was cornered not by Parliament, but by the very people who once called her family. She asked for time, a pause, anything to manage the chaos. But William's response was final. "Time is what we've run out of." With her family turning against her and Parliament closing in, Camilla made a desperate final move that stunned the world. Dressed in black and seated before millions, Queen Camilla stared into the camera and whispered, "I didn't want it to end this way." What followed was the most dramatic royal confession of the modern era. In a move that caught even the palace off guard, Camilla requested a live televised address, a rare, unprecedented act in royal history. King Charles reportedly pleaded with her not to go through with it, fearing it would only fuel public backlash. But Camilla, cornered by inquiry, haunted by silence, and stripped of the last thread of control, refused to vanish without a voice. She wanted the country to hear her story from her lips, not from Parliament, not from Anne, not from William, not from the press. What came next stunned the nation. Camilla began by acknowledging financial misjudgments, a carefully chosen word. She admitted to errors in oversight, to leaning on advisors she shouldn't have trusted, and to making decisions that, in hindsight, endangered the crown's reputation. But she stopped short of admitting corruption. She insisted that while the systems she created were private, they were never meant to be criminal. They were, as she put it, a shield, not a sword. But it was her emotional unraveling that truly gripped the world. Her voice cracked as she spoke of loneliness not in the palace halls, but in public perception, of never being fully embraced, of waking each day for decades as the woman who would never be Diana. She confessed that beneath the titles and tiaras, there lived a woman always trying to prove she belonged, and always fearing the day the world would remind her she didn't. She cried openly, not for the headlines, but for the weight of carrying a crown she now admitted might never have truly fit. Then came her boldest words. She said she had taken it upon herself to protect what the crown wouldn't, to guard against threats, financial or otherwise, that she felt others ignored. She claimed that where the system was weak, she had stepped in. Where traditions failed, she had compensated. In her mind, she had been doing what was necessary for survival. As the statement neared its end, Camilla turned her gaze to her family. She apologized to William, to Anne for the burdens they had carried in silence, for the pain her decisions may have caused, and then she turned to the people. She asked, not for forgiveness, but for understanding. "Separate the crown from the woman," she pleaded. "I didn't ask for the crown. I only asked to stand beside the man I loved." The response was immediate and electric. Social media fractured into two furious halves. Some praised her bravery, calling it the most human moment a royal had ever delivered. Others called it manipulation, an attempt to rewrite a legacy already in ruins. Petitions trended, polls exploded. Evening talk shows debated her sincerity in real time. The palace had never seen anything like it. But the monarchy didn't wait for the public to decide. Behind palace walls, a quiet but permanent decision was already signed. It arrived in a sealed scroll with no press, no ceremony. Just a signature from King Charles, co-signed by Parliament. In one motion, Queen Camilla's reign was redefined forever. Behind the grandeur of Buckingham's iron gates, the final decision had already been made. While the public continued to debate her tearful confession and while media outlets dissected every syllable of her broadcast, the monarchy acted. With Parliament's formal cooperation and under mounting pressure from within the crown itself, King Charles issued a royal decree that would forever alter the trajectory of his queen's place in history. Effective immediately, Camilla was removed from all official royal duties. No more engagements, no more public appearances, no more charities bearing her name. The crown, once shared in symbolic unity, would now be worn alone. Parliament followed swiftly, suspending any current or future funding allocated to initiatives directly tied to Camilla. Institutions that once bore her crest quietly began the process of rebranding. The pageantry of her role, once carefully orchestrated and emotionally rehabilitated, was now disassembled piece by piece, as if history itself was being redacted in real time. But this wasn't simply about exile. It was about containment, about ensuring no such breach of trust could ever threaten the monarchy again. To that end, a new advisory board was created, an unprecedented move in royal history. This independent body, composed of senior MPs, auditors, and select members of the Crown Estate, was tasked with monitoring royal financial transparency for generations to come. It was a clear message, etched in legislative permanence. The era of blind faith in royal discretion was over. In Camilla's absence, the transition had to be managed delicately, and there was only one figure the public and palace trusted to do it: William. Quietly and without fanfare, he was appointed to oversee the shift. He would now represent the crown in roles formerly held by Camilla. Though not declared formally, it was understood by all. The future of the monarchy now sat squarely on his shoulders. Catherine, dignified and unwavering, stepped further into the spotlight, embodying the vision of a modern royal era built not on secrecy, but on sincerity. And as for Camilla, she vanished from the public eye. Retreating to her private estate in the countryside, she became a ghost of the institution she once fought so hard to enter. No interviews, no memoir, only silence. Whether it was shame, heartbreak, or sheer exhaustion, the woman who once stood beside the king in public triumph now stood alone, watching a nation move forward without her. The public remained divided. Some still remembered her as a woman caught between legacy and love, but for many, the final decree felt like poetic justice, a restoration of honor, a quiet, reverent return to the values embodied by another woman long gone, but never forgotten: Diana. Her name lingered on lips across the country, not as a ghost of the past, but as a benchmark for what the monarchy should have been all along. As the sun sets on Camilla's royal chapter, the shadows of unchecked power, secrecy, and shattered trust linger forever etched into the monarchy's troubled history.